Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for episode 23 of Cage Side Convos. I am Rick,
What's up? This is Quince.
and we're coming to you guys live here from American Top Team in Watertown.
Yeah, absolutely. This morning we're actually going to be talking a little bit about failure and the fear of failure and how that kind of either pushes us forward or holds us back. And you know, it's a very interesting topic because it's always a very reoccurring thought, at least in my life. Honestly, thinking back, I was a very, I would say average, even below average student. You know, coming up, I was very disinterested. My absences were very high, and this was just high school. Honestly, if it wasn't for sports, who knows how that would have gone. You know, I wanted to go and pursue sports in college. So with that, you know, I was able to get through high school, but made it to college, and the love of sports or playing sports really wasn't enough still to hold my attention. And I would continue to fail classes. I would continue to get kicked out of colleges, you know, every college I went to almost, and fail over and over. So my education, I would fail. Relationships, I would fail in that. And even my own health and well-being, I would fail in that. And this fear of failure kind of kept me from moving forward. And until I got to probably my lowest point, failing everything I had tried or been put into or that was suggested to me. I found myself in my lowest point. And honestly, it was at that point that I almost found, I realized that I'm like, after failing all of this shit, I'm still here. Right. You know what I mean? I'm still alive. I had this newfound awareness that the shit didn't kill me. And I was able to use all those failures kind of as my new platform or foundation to start moving forward. And because I had nothing more to lose, I was able to risk everything. I really was able to push for what I loved or what I felt like I needed to do, in regards to purpose. So even though it took me years to realize, to understand that the failure itself really was never holding me back, but it was the fear of, it was the anticipation of that kept me in this cycle of failed attempts. Right. And that was probably one of the most eye-opening things, just to think about right now, and I'm not saying I'm not the most successful person, but I certainly wouldn't be where I'm at today had I not failed over and over and over again, in the past.
I think, just listening to you talk, when you talk about failing school, right? I think this translates well to a lot of other things. So our perceived failure, mm-hmm. right? When we fail in school, so when we get a failing grade in a class, all we're doing is we're underperforming to a set standard, right? Who sets the standard in school? Other people, right? Teachers, the administrators, the state, yep. Right? So the standard that's set in school is a standard of somebody else, right? So we're being graded on our perceived standard that somebody else has set for us, right? So I don't think, a lot of times in that situation when people aren't invested in school, and you fail and you get it knocked into your head that it's very, very bad to fail school, mm-hmm. you start getting a very negative association with the word failure. Sure. Right? Your teachers are mad at you, your parents are mad at you, and I'm not going to sit here and tell people to drop out of school, right? I believe that there are important things that can be gained through an education, and discussing the merits of the educational system is a completely different topic, mm-hmm. and one that I'm personally not qualified to dive into too much. Sure. But I think that that kind of standard there is something that everybody's very aware of. And anybody you talk to, typically actually the straight A students in mm-hmm. school, I think are the ones that have that most intense fear of failure. If they fail at school, then they can't go to college. If they fail in college, then they can't get a career, Right. So this whole structured notion of if I fail this one tiny thing, everything else goes to shit. Yeah. And then on the other end of it, the constant failures too, kind of, you give up on trying sometimes. I think, you like you said, sports weren't enough for you to want to stay motivated and finish school, or finish college, and it took a long time for you to get to a point where you had nothing, and to go back and examine all the failures. And I think the fear of failure creates negative habits.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. And you start misinterpreting that. You start thinking that because that was your experience in the past, that's going to continue to be your experience in the future.
Right.
When really the awareness of failure is kind of just the opposite. I think there's more knowledge and information in failure than there is in success, honestly.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the standard cliche is, I learned more from my losses than I did from my wins. But when you're winning or when you're successful, you typically you did everything right, or you did everything right enough to succeed. Right. Whereas if you fail, you can go back and you can examine your case, say, this is what I did wrong, this is where I can grow,
right.
This is where I can improve.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. It is kind of cliche, but I feel like, so even think about someone who has worked from the ground up, created their own business, their own company, and works through till retirement at this successful company, and then wants to hand that successful company down to their kid. Right, who kind of just came up in that. Now, I'm not saying that there can't be success. There are a bunch of stories and situations in which, the kids can come through and continue on with the business. But I think oftentimes when handed something, whether it is success, quote unquote success, if you don't have the background, if you're not rooted in that success, which when I say rooted, I mean the failures, the attempts, when all the things that didn't go right that help you get to the right conclusion or situation, if you're not rooted in that success, how long can you carry that? If you don't really feel and understand what it is to lose, or to mess it up, how does success weigh on you?
Well, and that too. So the same notion that we talked about with like the school, but that's defining success to someone else's standard. You inherit this, for your example, you inherit this company from your parent. You haven't necessarily lived all the trials and tribulations. Right. You haven't lived the myriad different failures that have occurred, and you don't have the understanding of what it takes to prevent these failures. Or you have the crushing weight of, if I fail with this company, it goes bankrupt. Right. My parents are going to disown me. I ruined the company. I put all these people out of work. Right. There's a huge stress of failure. There's no acceptance of failure, because if you fail at that point, a lot of bad shit happens. So you take away that wiggle room right there, and even on that scale, there has to be some kind of acceptance of failure, or the possibility of failure, because if you're afraid to fail, honestly, I don't think you ever try as hard as you possibly can if you're afraid. Right. You have to know that failure is an option, but you can't have it as a negative consequence. Sure.
Sure. And you said something about the straight A student, and how it's more difficult for them to kind of move forward or kind of take risks. Right. And it was I was watching something, and Will Smith said, what did he say? He said, the problem with winning, when you continually win, is you forget how to lose. You forget how to lose. And he's saying, like, winning actually kills creativity at times, which that one really hit home with me. He's like, it kills creativity because, like you said, it takes away that wiggle room. Now you have more to lose, so now you're going to put less of yourself out there. Right.
You've learned what works, and if it's working, why change?
Sure.
You don't have to.
Right.
And you see that a lot with athletes, guys who go through high school on always winning, or I see it a lot with wrestlers, guys who are, like state champs. They go through a season, they have a perfect record and stuff, and they go, think they're going to go to college, and they get mopped up in college, and then they quit.
Right.
People that, fighters. Unfortunately, Ronda Rousey was one. She was undefeated in the UFC for a long time. She was an Olympic judoka. She was performing at the highest levels of sports, and she lost, and she just couldn't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
She hadn't lost in so long. She was performing at such a high level. She loses a fight, and then she falls off.
She got attention quick too.
Yeah,
she got a lot of attention quick.
Yeah.
Started getting movie deals. Started getting big time money.
Yep.
So probably a little distracted, but yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, she fell off.
Absolutely, and it sucked because she was, she gave women in mixed martial arts a name and a role model, and brought a lot of light to the sport, and did a lot for it, but not knowing how to lose, not knowing how to fail, she shut her down as soon as she did.
Yes.
Emotionally, I know I read something from her where she was in a very, very dark place after losing, and just couldn't handle it,
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the many benefits of failure is the definition of resiliency.
Yeah.
The resiliency that's learned and it's forced, that willpower is something that you kind of find through failure.
Yeah.
Because I don't, success isn't necessarily the absence of failure.
Right.
It's how you respond to it, for sure.
Right.
How you're gonna respond to nobody coming to your show. How you're gonna respond to getting kicked in the face and knocked out. In a big time pay-per-view fight.
Yep.
And that's how we learn to adapt.
Right.
To the goals that we want.
Right.
So the worst thing in the world you could do is quit.
Yeah.
I guess thinking about it, that's the only true definition of failure in my book, is to quit or to not try.
Right.
Which I've certainly been a victim of that, and that's how I have come to understand it.
Sure.
But I think resiliency is one of the main gifts from failure that we get.
Well, and I think it's important to understand too, because once you start looking at it as, okay, well, I only truly fail if I quit, right? Then you start redefining perceived failures, right? Because now failure is my definition, right? Failure is not what somebody else thinks. If I go to, again, if I put myself in that situation where say I'm performing at the highest level, I lose a fight, other people think I failed. You lost, you're supposed to defend your title, you're supposed to, fuck this person up in a fight, and you lose, so other people, you failed, you lost your perfect record, and so that sucks. But for me, it's a disappointment. That's a bummer. Not saying, and I should probably say I in this situation, like I'm ever going to be there, but if I decide that that's a failure for me, if my goal was to be, have a perfect record, be undefeated for 50 fights, and then I guess technically that's a failure of obtaining that goal. But is that really a realistic goal? Is that a feasible goal, or did I set myself up for failure?
Right.
Did I intentionally give myself this impossible task, knowing that I couldn't be successful?
So almost effort over outcome.
Right.
Effort over outcome.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. So we were studying Stoicism, and they use the metaphor of the archer, right? Once you've let go of your arrow, that's all you can do, and the outcome, it doesn't involve you.
Right.
So as long as you prepare and do the best you can the whole time, try as hard as you can all the while, then the outcome, whether you obtain it or not, isn't always up to you.
Right.
And then if somebody, if I shoot and I miss the target, fine. I tried, but I learned from it, and I can do better next time.
Yes. And of course everybody wants to win, and that's that's common sense. So that's not what we're saying. We're not saying the point is not to win, but I think we're saying that when we say effort over outcome, we're saying that if you focus on the building blocks of success and the outcome, which is the effort and the adaptation and the resilience, the outcome is inevitable.
Right.
It's inevitable.
Right.
So it's almost, you don't necessarily have to concern yourself as much with that destination or that point of success or idea of success, because you know all the little counterparts that you work to build, that road that you pave is going to get you there one way or the other, as long as you're not giving up on it.
Right. And I think, but I mean, we talk about this all the time, man. When one of the big things you talk about, you know, is the trust in the process, and you, as you're doing this, and you're learning and you're building this resiliency and stuff. Next thing you know, you're just in love with the process. You're in love with the struggle. You're in love with the difficulties. You're in love with the failure. You're in love with the success. But it's just a matter of constantly progressing and constantly moving forward. Yeah. You know, and I think when we talk about people that set impossible goals for themselves, knowing that they won't obtain it, you know, we talk about fear of failure, but I also think a little bit there's a fear of success, which is very closely linked, because when we map out, you know, say we map out our life, we map out a goal, this is what we're working towards. When we hit that goal, we don't know what's next. We don't know what's after that. So maybe it's harder. You know, maybe we work hard as shit to get to this goal. We hit this goal, and then from there it gets even harder. Right. Or we don't know what it looks like. We don't know where the road goes. We have no map past that point. Yeah. Yep. So that fear of success, I think, directly translates to fear of the unknown. You know, because if we don't know what to expect, then we might fail. Right. So it's not necessarily the fear of failing on the way to this goal. We know we can achieve that goal. It's fear of achieving that goal and then not knowing what to do, and then ultimately failing, right? So fear of success and fear of failure, I think, are inherently the same thing. You know, it stifles our growth, and we, you know, so you use the metaphor of building blocks and stuff. You intentionally sabotage the foundation of it, knowing that once you get to the point where you're almost to the goal, everything is going to crumble. Yeah. You know, or you know, some people just quit building at that point. They get so close and then they go do something else. It's
so familiar. I was just this past Sunday, I was talking to, do you ever meet Rob Malloy?
No, I never got to meet him.
So real smart dude, genuine guy. He's stationed out in Germany right now, so we've got the 6-hour time difference, so we can't always connect as much as we'd like. So we sat on the phone for almost a couple hours, you know, just talking about where we were at. And I was like, man, you know, honestly, the you know, success, you know, the relative success has almost been a creativity killer. Right. You know, I've lost a lot of creativity. I kind of like, you know, took myself out of certain situations and, you know, stopped putting out music and all these other things. You know, because I'm like, you know, it wasn't a situation that I foresaw. Sure. And he's like, yeah. He's like, that makes perfect sense. He's like, have you ever heard the story of the lobster? I said, no. He's like, what's the first thing a lobster has to do when he outgrows his shell? And I said, get rid of the old one? Yeah. He's like, right. He's like, so when a lobster gets rid of his old, smaller shell, he's vulnerable to predators. So what does he do? He goes and he hides behind a rock until the larger shell is formed. And I said, shit, that makes sense. He's like, now how does the lobster know that it's time to get a larger shell? And I said, discomfort. He's like, exactly. He's like, this is all the natural process, man. He's like, don't ever, you know, don't forget that no matter the levels of success, gotta understand there are always levels higher and higher. And anytime that you reach that next level, you still have to go through that same process of discomfort, recognizing, shedding that shell that shell of success that no longer defines what success may be right now for you. Also that place of vulnerability, and then the resurgence of where you're at right now. And I'm like, God damn. And that was like, and like I said, we spoke for a long time. That little story right there was maybe 5 minutes of it. Yeah. You know? And it was just so settling because it seemed to fit so well with, you know, almost over a year of what I've seen and what I've been going through.
Right. And just, I mean, that's an amazing metaphor for the process. Is it's time to grow when you're uncomfortable.
Yes.
You know, and then once you start pushing through that discomfort, you end up in a very vulnerable position because it's unknown.
Fear of unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have to admit to yourself sometimes that, man, I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I don't know if this is the right move right now.
Right.
But it's constantly growing and understanding and building habits and stuff, right? And I think so. While you're telling that story, I was kind of trying to think of what's the difference between a habit and a process, right?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
What's the difference between a habit and a process? And the process?
Yeah.
Well, I think the process is built of habits.
Sure.
It's built of learned habits through failed habits in which we shed, and productive habits in which help us connect to the next habit.
Right.
And the entirety of those linked habits, I think, is the process.
Right. So now, the understanding which habits are productive habits and which habits are negative habits, right? In each cycle of defining habits, there's a process. Yeah. So in the process of habits, right, of all these linked habits, right, in building a habit, there's a mini process.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So there's these constant cycles that are always going on. So little parts of our life, you know, maybe we're a lobster in one habit, you know what I mean? And we're redefining that, which in turn is going to turn around and redefine the whole process, because maybe it changes another habit, you know, and ultimately just understanding, and that's why it takes so long, because if we say, all right, if we need, say we need 10 good habits for our process to work correctly, for us to constantly grow. If one of these habits, if we fail at one of these habits, right, then that we have to remove that from the process. So now all of a sudden our process fails, right?
Right. Well, no.
Right, exactly.
I'm just agreeing.
Yeah. But if we, it only fails if we don't understand that we have to redefine that, or we have to build from it, or we have to grow from it, and a lot of times what makes it so vulnerable is when we decide to change and when we tell ourselves we have to change, the first thing that we do is we have to admit that we were wrong.
Right.
How I was living my life, my chain of habits, what I was prioritizing, one of these things or all of these things or some of these things were wrong. I didn't have the right information. I was making decisions that weren't the most efficient for me, or this isn't where I see my life going anymore, or this isn't where I want to steer my ship.
Sure.
And admitting you're wrong to a lot of people is failure. Because what happens in school when you get a question wrong? You lose points.
Right.
You get too many questions wrong, you fail the test.
Right.
You fail too many tests, you fail the grade. Right? So redefining and shifting that focus, like getting an answer wrong now, that's somebody else's standard. If I admit to you that I was wrong about something, you can rub it in my face and you can try to make me feel like shit all you want.
Right.
Not that not you personally would ever do that to me, at least not on camera.
Right. But the general you.
Right, yeah. So I don't have to match your standards. I have to define success for myself. By defining success, I can subsequently define failure, or vice versa.
Sure. Sure.
So admitting I'm wrong isn't a loss. Admitting I'm wrong is not a failure. Admitting I'm wrong and then doing it again and again and again and again, keeping this habit that I just proved wrong, that's a failure.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. And like I said before, to not allow those things to hold you back is the greatest sense of freedom that you have.
Well, because it starts to shift the narrative, from failure is not the end. Failure just means we have to go somewhere else.
Right.
Failure just means we have to change direction. And like if you thought, okay, I'm going to be a state champion wrestler, then I'm going to go on and wrestle at a Division I school. I'm going to be a national champion, and okay, that's great. Maybe you did all that. But when college is over, if that's as far as you ever wanted to take your career and college is over, what now?
Right.
What do you do?
Right.
You succeeded, but the next step is ultimately going to determine whether you're successful or you're a failure in life overall. You know, so how you have to, even in the face of success, you still have to redefine your goals.
Right.
You have to venture into the unknown, and you have to redefine yourself.
Right.
You know, so success, like you know, we talked about before, success sometimes is just as scary as failure.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. You know, absolutely. You know, just depending on where you're at, you know, what stage you're at.
Right.
You know, it makes me smile to think that when at the beginning going about this program itself, we used to, I mean, we would come prepared. We'd have an outline of exactly what we wanted to say and how we wanted to say it, and we get through it, and it was fine. But there were days in which we weren't as prepared. You know,
Sure.
we came in here and we sat down and turned the camera on, and we kind of fumbled for a little bit into the unknown, and the amount of, you know, the genuine information or the genuine conversation had in that unknown was nothing that we could have scripted or planned out. And how that's almost become the new foundation of how we approach what we do here at K-Shot Convos.
Right.
So at first what we assumed was failure.
Yeah.
What we defined as failure until we found ourselves in that position, which, you know, eventually you will.
Right.
Eventually you always will. You're going to fail eventually. But we were able to redefine, you know, what it was that we were trying to obtain through this, and how we go about getting it. And so I think that was a game changer, and made stuff like this just so, you know, just natural, more natural and fluid.
Yeah. And yeah, honestly, man, it's that redefinition, and it's not, I think as we were doing it, I certainly didn't recognize that we were very slowly redefining it.
Yeah, me either.
But, you know, I forget what conversation was. There's one day that we came into it, and like you said, it was something that we hadn't sat down for quite as long as we normally would. We hadn't quite researched it as thoroughly, and we kind of forced our hand. We're like, look, man, whether this is awesome or if it sucks, like we got to pull the trigger on it.
Right.
We sat down, we talked, and we walked away, and I was like, man, that was just awesome.
Sure.
And really solidified the fact that, you know, the goal is just to sit down and talk.
Right.
You know, and just and learn and grow through, you know, through mutual conversation. You know, and it brought, like, this every single week. It brings me a lot of joy to be able to sit down and talk with you.
Right.
You know, and for you guys to join us is awesome.
Yeah, certainly just a plus. But you know, those times in which we do get caught up in, you know, in this sort of unknown, or where we're just kind of like freestyling this shit. I leave those conversations pumped, you know, with a lot of energy. With a lot of energy, and exhilaration. You know, something that I don't necessarily always receive just from, you know, going line for line. What I think I'm supposed to be saying, what I think, you know, you guys want to hear, which of course, you know, I care about. But, you know, I kind of want to learn at the same time going through this. You know, I think that sort of vulnerability allows kind of everyone to learn, and certainly the more people that join in with us on the combos, either you know, on screen or just in life, real life. I think people are more open to that.
Sure, absolutely, man. And this, I mean, one of the coolest things is the fact that we, you know, jot down a couple bullet points. We'll take notes. Just it's so we don't forget our talking points, or so I can really listen to you and I can jot something down. I don't have to sit there and think about it or disconnect from the conversation and stuff. A lot of it's really transformed the way I have conversations in life.
Just in general?
You know, and I found myself, so you mentioned that vulnerability. I found myself much more willing to explore that vulnerability in just a regular conversation with somebody, you know, and I found even random conversations are just much more enriching than probably than they used to be, you know, but I feel like that exploration and understanding that if I say something and somebody doesn't respond positively to it, or if I don't accurately predict how they're going to respond to it, doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means that the conversation is going to take a different path. You know? So even kind of a micro habit that builds the process. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, no, and you know, like you said, that ego, that vulnerability, having conversations, it's not about being wrong, you know? It's about being in a situation to learn.
Yeah.
You know, to be open to learning, whether it's yourself or the other person or both at the same time.
Right.
But if you come in to a convo, you know, certainly to come into any situation prepared is necessary.
Sure.
But to come in knowing exactly what you want to say, it's only sticking to the script, you only have one or two ways that it's going to end up.
Right.
And it could be the same way as always. You know, you're the winner or whatever,
right.
or there's just going to be contention.
Right. You're either right or you're mad.
You're either right or you're mad. Yeah. Very true.
Which I think, I mean, I've been guilty of it. I see it a lot, especially you go to certain, visit certain topics on social media or in the bar. You know, you never talk about politics or religion at the bar. I think social media is the exact same way, man, is that people go in and they have their script, they have the things they're going to say, and regardless of what you say, they're not going to change that. Yeah. They're just going to keep recycling through that same script, which is fine, but usually the conversation ends with somebody being mad, calling names. And again, I mean, one of the biggest things is just learning how to be in the moment and understanding now. You know, I'm glad I'm at this point I am now in my life, but holy shit, man, especially through like my early and mid 20s, I was definitely a very combative conversationalist. I was not enjoyable to have a conversation with, and I think I'm starting very slowly to become enjoyable to have a conversation with. Right?
Yeah.
Been practicing for 23 weeks, so
that's why we got to put you on camera to keep it even. You know what I mean? Keep it fair.
Like I won't snap off. But the understanding the overall process, one of the habits of that is learning, is wanting to learn. And something I got from my jiu-jitsu coach is he said, he's like, I don't always want to be right. I just want to know what is right. I just want to know what's true. You know, so that in the search of finding what's truthful, you have to accept information that you didn't know before.
Right.
Because you don't know all the information.
Right.
And it seems, you know, another cliche is the more you learn, the more you know you don't know.
Right.
You know, and each topic, each sub part of a conversation is so deep that there's a good chance that every single conversation I have with every single person I meet, there's a very good chance they're going to tell me something I don't know.
Right.
And if that information I don't know forces me to change my outlook on life, then I have to go through the Lobster process of that particular habit or that particular vein of knowledge, and I have to revamp my outlook on it, and then I have to understand how that affects my overall process, and I have to grow from there. I guess I don't have to, but I want to. Right. You know, and that's I think the most deep-seated desire I've gained from understanding and building a process is, it's not failure, it's growth, and it's constant. It's constant, and then you find that you can learn so much. Always. Yeah.
And I think social media, like you brought up, is a good example of this. But I think a lot of people want to be perceived as being right, and they want to be perceived as successful. So we do and say a lot of things, and we kind of stick, to that same script as always, so we can continue to be perceived by these standards, which you brought up before. I see all the time on social media, people will say the same thing, and whether it's right or wrong, as long as there are a group of people that are saying the same thing, they're good with that, because that means they're right. That means that that perceived success. So if 2 + 2 is 5, to one person it's wrong, but if it's 2 + 2 is 5 to 50 people, hey, what's it? It doesn't even matter if you're wrong anymore. You've got a group, you've got your people. But so stuff like that has helped me to really understand, like, I don't want to be perceived as successful. I don't know what other people's definitions are, expectations, anything like that. I just know that that's not how I got to the position I am. And it's tricky because once you do pick up, you get into a position or have a platform in which people view you as successful, now they kind of almost hold you accountable to their definition or their box. And it's easy to, once you start getting attention, to kind of cater to those boxes.
Right. Well, they have a snapshot of you.
Yes.
And they hold it up.
Yes.
Every single, like, well, this is where you were. This is
I
your
don't recognize
snapshot.
this person.
I don't recognize that it's a movie. It's
Right.
constantly moving.
Constantly moving, and that's definitely something I've been working to overcome, recently. And when I say recently, I mean in the last, couple years or so.
Yeah.
So, I definitely try and stay away from that.
Yeah.
And try and connect now with just people who are a little bit open to growth, like you said, growth and learning, and the not the opportunity to be wrong, but the chance, the risk to be wrong.
Right. And well, and understanding, whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, what can I learn from this? What can I benefit?
Sure.
Pop's got a shout out there. Morning, Dad. I figured you'd probably be working right now, but I guess that's why you're top dog at the shipyard, right? You got other people to do that for you.
Right.
Hang out and watch our K-side Convos, but
Awesome.
busting your chops. Always appreciate you tuning in. And speaking of which, I know that's why he's in charge there. Is he's always right. I don't know how much if he's not listening now. I'm just talking shit. But it's I like the way you said when people see you present yourself as being successful, then they put you in this little box that they define as success.
Right.
And your opinion can't matter to me. Like if your measuring stick's not the same as mine,
Right.
I'm not going to be successful on yours, but I'm going to be fine by mine, and that's the only way you can live your life.
Sure, and it's not a personal attack on any other individual. But I had written something down not too long ago, and it was that validation is a blessing before it becomes a burden.
Sure,
especially when you're first getting into something, to have validation and have people, come up to you, be like, oh shit, that's dope, or that's cool, or that's whatever it is. You kind of need that, because it helps if you're not getting confidence from self necessarily at first, or what you're doing. That kind of gives you a sense of confidence. But as you progress and as you obtain confidence from other things that are more autonomous, I think is the word.
Sounds like a good word.
Right? Sounds like a but more self-provided is what I'm saying. You don't necessarily need that from others as much. It's always nice to hear, but the thing is, now what happens on that day where you do something that you really love and want to show, and you don't get that same validation, or people are like, oh, that's cool, but it's not what you used to do, or it's not how I would say it, or it's not how. So now do you go back and reshuffle your shit and do it all over again, or can you be like, I understand and I respect that, but this is where I'm at, this is what I'm doing.
Right.
So that validation is a blessing until it becomes a burden.
Sure.
So and that was just one of those things, leveling up that stood out to me.
Absolutely, man, and you see that a lot in especially in the music scene. Guys will come out with a new album and they'll be like, oh, you know what, I miss their old stuff. Their old stuff was awesome, and then they'll come out with something that kind of emulates their old stuff. They're like, oh, they're selling out. They're just doing what the fans want. So and at some point,
man, it's fickle.
Yeah, that validation becomes something that you can't appease, and trying to appease it is just going to drive you crazy. It frustrate you beyond belief. Whereas, like you said, if you can look internally and say, well, this is just where I am. Like I understand that you don't like it, and that's okay. I appreciate the feedback. I'll take it into consideration. And to have someone critique you, especially negatively, I think it forces you to go back and weigh that against your opinion. Okay, well, is this valid? Are they right? Is this good information, or are they just being shitty?
Sure.
Are they trying to truncate my success? They're trying to keep me from growing.
Yeah. And I think it does say just as much, if not more, about them than it does necessarily about you.
Yes.
I certainly looking or thinking about it, a lot of my favorite artists continue to change. Whether or not I like the outcome, I'm inspired by the risk it takes to change, and just the different sounds, rather than just doing the same thing over and over. It still inspires me, even if I don't play the shit every day.
Well, that you can see that process. When they come out with something new, that's being vulnerable. When
For
you
sure.
change, that's
sure.
vulnerability, you know, especially when you're doing it on a public platform, an exposed platform. You know, the more you're in front of people, the more, you know, you risk being critiqued or risk
Right.
not being validated and stuff. But the problem is complacency breeds death, man. You get to where you know what's working and you
Yep.
keep doing that.
Yep.
Like you said, it stifles your creativity. You quit being creative, you die. You know.
Yeah.
So it's that you have to go through that the lobster kind of lifestyle. You have to
A
break that
discomfort.
shell.
You gotta go through the discomfort.
Be vulnerable.
And really embrace the things that failure kind of lays in front of you, because this shit is gold.
Right.
And, you know, if you let it be, if you open your eyes to it, you'll see it's
Right.
gold.
Yeah. If you take those failures and you use them as building blocks.
Right.
You know, absolutely. Deal, man.
What you think?
Success. Yeah. Awesome.
I think one of the key highlights is something when you just said that you know, failure is not the end.
Yeah.
And you know, I think if you guys take away anything from this conversation today, I think this is something that I'll probably take, is that failure is certainly not the end, and it is a continual new beginning almost.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Redefine the process, redefine your goals, you know, change the steps that it takes to get there, you
Sure.
know, and yeah, awesome, man. Love
Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us once again. We got to figure out next week.
Next week, yeah, I think next week might end up being a Wednesday situation.
Yeah.
I do believe we're going to have our good friend Fine Print Williams on the show, which I'm super, super pumped about. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Quince, as always, thank you, man. Enjoy the conversation.
No, thank you. I appreciate you, man.
And yeah, we'll talk to everybody next week.
Go out and fail something today, man. Go out and
Yeah.
fail a couple things today. Let us know what you think.
We're gonna get a lot of phone calls.